The neon lights of Zeus cast an ethereal glow across the sprawling metropolis, illuminating towering spires that pierced the amber sky. Holographic signboards flickered with advertisements in a dozen alien languages, their colors reflecting off the sleek surfaces of buildings that seemed to defy gravity. From his vantage point at the edge of the bustling marketplace, Elias Frost could see the stark division of the city, the upper levels where Centauri aristocrats dwelled in opulent luxury, and the lower districts where humans like him scrabbled for existence. 3 centuries had passed since humans first entered Centauri space, yet they remained firmly at the bottom of the rigid social hierarchy. The Centauri Empire, with its strict caste system, had reluctantly allowed humans to settle on their worlds, but only as laborers, servants, and, in Elias's case, pilots willing to transport cargo that more respectable citizens wouldn't touch. Elias checked his credit balance on his worn wrist unit. 30 credits. Barely enough for a meal, let alone the parts he needed to repair his cargo skiff. He sighed, adjusting the collar of his dark gray jacket that had seen better days. The fabric was frayed at the edges, much like his patience for hauling fertilizer and contraband just to survive another day in this alien metropolis. Another day, another desperate hustle, he muttered to himself, pushing through the crowd of 6 armed Kalari merchants and bulbous-headed Jex tourists. The air smelled of exotic spices and engine exhaust, a peculiar mix that had become familiar over the years. His reflection caught in a polished shop window. Hazel eyes, tired but determined, 3-day stubble, and brown hair that needed a cut. The face of a man who had stopped dreaming big and settled for getting by. The marketplace pulsed with activity. Vendors shouted their wares. Customers haggled over prices, and security drones buzzed overhead, their sensors alert for any sign of trouble. Elias moved with practiced ease, knowing which alleys to avoid and which shops might offer work to someone with his particular set of skills. Lost in thought about his next potential job, Elias failed to notice the sleek black limousine hovering just inches above the ground. He collided with its side, the impact sending him stumbling backward. The vehicle's door slid open, and a green-skinned chauffeur with elongated ears emerged, his yellow eyes flashing with contempt. "Watch where you're going, human," the chauffeur snarled, his voice carrying the distinctive musical accent of Upper Geos. "This vehicle belongs to the House of Valen. You could be imprisoned for merely touching it." Elias straightened, fighting the instinct to apologize. "Perhaps your employer should consider parking in designated zones instead of the middle of a public thoroughfare," he replied, his tone deliberately light despite the tension. The chauffeur's hand moved toward what was undoubtedly a concealed weapon, but before he could respond, the limousine's rear door whispered open. The marketplace seemed to still as a figure emerged, draped in an elegant black bodysuit that caught the neon lights like liquid shadow. Sunri Valen stepped onto the street with the practiced grace of Centauri royalty. Her skin was a deep orange, the mark of the highest caste, and her eyes glowed like molten fire beneath delicately arched brows. A subtle pattern of bioluminescent markings traced the curve of her cheekbones, pulsing gently with her heartbeat. She wore her status as effortlessly as her attire, which, despite its apparent simplicity, likely cost more than Elias had earned in the past year. Her gaze fell on Elias, and her expression shifted from mild curiosity to unmistakable disdain. "A creature of your caste should not be near me," she said, her voice melodic yet cold. "Leave." Elias felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, but he masked it with a mischievous grin. "My apologies, Your Highness. I didn't realize the marketplace had been reserved for royalty today." Sunri's eyes narrowed, the orange glow intensifying. She dismissed him with a gesture and turned to continue on her way, her bodysuit catching the light as she moved. It was then that Elias noticed something fall from a concealed pocket, a small octagonal device that glinted with an inner blue light. Without thinking, he reached out and caught it before it hit the ground. The object was warm to the touch, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift under his gaze. It was unlike any technology he'd seen before, clearly ancient and valuable. Through the thinning crowd and the sunlight-pink streets, Elias caught a glimpse of Sunri's face through the limousine's tinted window as it began to drift away. Her eyes widened in horror as she realized what she had lost and who now held it. For a moment, Elias considered calling after her, returning the device, and accepting whatever dismissive thanks she might offer. But something stopped him. The memory of her words, the way she had looked at him as if he were nothing more than dirt beneath her feet. Just one more score, he thought, slipping the device into his pocket. Maybe enough to get off this planet for good. Before he could decide his next move, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Turning slowly, he saw them, 3 figures moving through the crowd with unnatural grace. They had gray-blue, elongated skulls and eyes like black obsidian, devoid of emotion. Vexari, the most feared enforcers in the Zenturi Empire. Their gaze fixed on him with predatory focus. "The human with the keystone," one of them hissed, the words carrying despite the marketplace noise. "Bring him to Lord Krell." Elias didn't wait to hear more. He bolted, pushing through the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. Whatever he had found, it was far more valuable and dangerous than he had imagined. The Vexari gave chase, their slender bodies weaving through the crowd with frightening efficiency. Elias ducked into a narrow side street, where neon hollow ads for exotic produce and illicit contraband provided momentary cover. He could hear their footsteps behind him, closing in with each passing second. The maze of vendors and street performers offered brief moments of concealment. Elias darted past a 6-armed insectoid, selling sizzling skewers of meat, the aroma momentarily distracting him. Acting on impulse, he grabbed one of the skewers, noting with surprise that the jark meat actually smelled pleasant. "You pay now," the vendor chittered, but Elias was already moving, the hot skewer in hand. A Vexari appeared at the end of the alley, its obsidian eyes scanning methodically. Elias hurled the skewer, the sizzling meat striking the creature's face. It hissed in pain, giving Elias precious seconds to slip past and continue his flight. As he ran, memories of his arrival in Zeos flashed through his mind. He had come seeking opportunity, a fresh start far from the failing human colonies. Instead, he found prejudice and struggle, relegated to the lowest rungs of society simply because of his species. "I came to Zeos to make a fresh start. Never this," he thought, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Doubt crept in as he navigated the increasingly narrow passages. What if I'm nothing more than a clueless smuggler? What if I never amount to anything in this world? The sound of pursuit grew closer. Elias took a sharp turn into an even narrower alley, one that descended steeply toward the underbelly of the city. Few tourists ventured into Lower Zeos, the domain of outcasts and those who lived in the shadows of the Empire. The light changed as he descended, the garish neon replaced by softer, bioluminescent panels that cast a ghostly blue glow. The air grew thicker, heavy with moisture and the scent of decay. Elias slowed his pace, trying to quiet his breathing as he listened for signs of pursuit. A hand reached out from a darkened doorway, pulling him roughly inside. Elias struggled against the grip until a gravelly voice whispered, "Be still, human, unless you wish to die today." The speaker was a weathered Zanturi male, with rust-colored skin that had faded with age. One of his eyes had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that whirred softly as it focused on Elias's face. His clothing was simple but bore faded insignias of scholarly rank. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, his hand moving toward the small blaster concealed at his hip. "My name is Toran," the Zanturi replied, pressing his finger against a hidden panel in the wall. A section of flooring slid away, revealing a narrow staircase. "And, if you value your life, you will follow me now. The Vexari do not give up once they have marked their prey." Hesitating only briefly, Elias descended into the hidden chamber below. It was a small room filled with ancient artifacts and scrolls, illuminated by the same bioluminescent light that was common in Lower Zeos. Toran sealed the entrance and turned to Elias with unexpected urgency. "Show me what you found." "I don't know what you're talking about," Elias lied, his hand instinctively covering his pocket. The Zanturi's cybernetic eye flashed. "The keystone. I sensed its activation. The Vexari would not pursue a human so relentlessly otherwise." After a moment's hesitation, Elias removed the octagonal device from his pocket. It seemed to pulse more brightly in the dim light of the safe house, its etchings more pronounced. Toran took it with reverent hands, his organic eye widening. "By the first light," he whispered. "After all these years of searching, do you have any idea what you've stumbled upon, human?" "Enlighten me," Elias replied, keeping his distance, ready to flee if necessary. "This is one of 7 keystones to the Vault of Ascension," Toran explained, carefully turning the device to examine its markings. Ancient technology from the Communion era, when humans and Zanturi worked together as equals. Elias couldn't help but laugh. "Equals? Your people have made it abundantly clear that humans are beneath you." "Not always," Toran said solemnly. "The history you know has been curated by the High Council. My people call me a cultural preservationist, but they would label me a heretic if they knew the truths I've uncovered." A sound from above interrupted them, the distinctive hum of sonic cutters working through the door's locking mechanism. "The Vexari have found us," Toran said grimly. "They serve Lord Krell, a warlord who seeks to use the temple technology to seize control of the High Council. You must take the keystone and flee." "Why should I trust you?" Elias demanded. "For all I know, you're just another Zanturi trying to claim this thing for yourself." "Because I am offering you knowledge, not commands," Toran replied. "The choice is yours. Surrender the device and remain in ignorance, or learn its secrets and claim the reward that is rightfully yours." The sounds of cutting intensified. Time was running out. "I'm listening," Elias said. Toran nodded, a small smile crossing his weathered face. "The Vexari Syndicate serves Lord Krell, who seeks to use the keystones for political dominance. The aristocracy, the High Council, has suppressed the true history of our peoples for generations. This keystone is but one piece of a greater whole, a technology that could restore what was lost." "And what exactly was lost?" Elias asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "Partnership, equality, a future where humans and Zanturi built wonders among the stars, before the Great Schism tore us apart." Toran's voice grew passionate. "My own people's history has been suppressed, rewritten by patriarchs who feared losing their power." A loud crash from above signaled that the Vexari had broken through the first barrier. "There's no time," Toran said, pressing the keystone back into Elias's hand. "Take the tunnel behind the bookcase. It will lead you to the ancient sewers. Follow the flow until you see holographic graffiti marking the Dawn-era seals." "And then what?" "Find the Temple of First Light," Toran said, drawing a small blaster from beneath his robes. "It lies hidden beneath the city, forgotten by all but a few." The ceiling began to crack as sonic cutters worked through the floor above. "What about you?" Elias asked, suddenly reluctant to leave the old scholar. "I will buy you time," Toran said simply, positioning himself to face the entrance. "The fate of 2 peoples may rest on that keystone now. Do not let it fall into Krell's hands." Before Elias could protest, the ceiling gave way. 3 Vexari dropped into the chamber, their weapons drawn. Toran fired without hesitation, the blast catching one enforcer in the chest. "Go!" he shouted to Elias, continuing to fire as he backed toward the tunnel entrance. Elias hesitated only a moment before plunging into the darkness of the tunnel, the sounds of blaster fire echoing behind him. The passage was narrow and damp, forcing him to crouch as he moved forward. The only illumination came from faint, bioluminescent moss growing along the walls. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the cramped space, the tunnel widened into an ancient sewer system. The ceiling rose high enough for Elias to stand, and channels of slow-moving water flanked a central walkway. The air was stale but breathable, carrying the faint scent of minerals and time. Elias activated the small wrist flash he carried, casting a beam of light ahead. As Toran had instructed, he followed the flow of water, keeping watch for the holographic graffiti. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water and his own footsteps. A distant rumble from above reminded him that the Vexari would not give up their pursuit. Elias quickened his pace, fighting the growing sense that he had become entangled in something far beyond his understanding. After nearly an hour of cautious progress, he spotted it, a faint blue glow that didn't match the natural bioluminescence. As he approached, the glow resolved into intricate patterns, etched into the wall, pulsing gently with an inner light. It wasn't graffiti as he had expected, but ancient script, its meanings lost to time. Beside the glowing text was a small alcove that he might have missed if not for his wrist flash. Inside was a rusted lever, its surface covered in the same script. With no other obvious path forward, Elias pulled it. A section of the wall slid away with a grinding protest, revealing a narrow tunnel whose walls bore faded murals. As Elias's light played across them, he felt a chill run down his spine. The images depicted tall, orange-skinned Xanturi working alongside humans, building what appeared to be starships. Both species were portrayed as equals, collaborating on vast projects among the stars. "Impossible," he whispered, his fingers tracing the outline of a human figure, clasping hands with a Xanturi in what appeared to be a ceremonial pose. A low growl reverberated through the tunnel, Vexari scouters, moving through the sewers above. Elias pressed on, following the narrow passage as it transitioned from rough-hewn stone to polished marble with etched runes. The corridor began to slope downward, leading deeper beneath the city. Finally, the passage opened into a vast circular chamber, the Temple of First Light. Massive columns supported a domed ceiling etched with constellations. At the center stood a raised dais with a small pedestal, its surface bearing an octagonal depression that matched the shape of the keystone. Elias approached cautiously, the keystone warm in his hand. As he placed it onto the pedestal, the device sank into place with a soft click. Channels of blue-green light spread outward from the keystone, illuminating the floor and walls of the temple. The entire chamber hummed with awakening energy. The walls, previously dim, now glowed with vibrant frescoes depicting ancient ceremonies, humans and Xanturi exchanging gifts. Standing before an altar, their hands joined in what appeared to be a ritual bond. Above them, the words, "Rite of the First Night," were etched in both human and Xanturi script. A holographic map of Zeus materialized above the pedestal, a pulsing marker indicating their current location deep beneath the city. But it was not the map that captured Elias's attention. It was the sudden flood of visions that assaulted his mind. He saw a human diplomat and a Xanturi princess, their hands clasped in a psychic bond that transcended language. He witnessed millennium-old fleets of both species weaving among distant stars, establishing colonies and outposts together. And then came scenes of betrayal, a great schism that tore apart the alliance, followed by a systematic erasure of their shared history. Elias fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the torrent of images and emotions. As the visions faded, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. Torren's voice, though the scholar was nowhere to be seen. "You carry our people's only second chance," the voice intoned. "Find Sunri. She is blood-tuned to the Keystone's frequency." The temple trembled, dust falling from the ancient ceiling. The sounds of Vexari breaking through the outer chambers reached Elias's ears. "Return it to the Highborn," Torren's voice continued, growing fainter. "Only they can summon the other 6. Honor my sacrifice. Human. Restore what was lost." The voice faded completely as chunks of marble began to fall from the ceiling. The temple was collapsing, whether from age or Vexari intervention. Elias couldn't tell. He grabbed the keystone from the pedestal, plunging the chamber into partial darkness as the energized channels faded. A new passage had opened on the far side of the temple, revealed by the keystone's activation, with no other options. Elias sprinted toward it, dodging falling debris. The tunnel beyond sloped steeply upward, its walls lined with the same bioluminescent moss he had seen earlier. After a frantic climb, Elias emerged not into the streets of Zeos as he had expected, but into a cavernous dock carved from the interior of a massive floating asteroid. Ancient, shell-shaped starships were docked in neat rows, their hulls bearing the same script he had seen in the temple. A small workshop occupied one corner of the dock, tools and components scattered across workbenches. Before he could explore further, the whine of an engine drew his attention to a sleek shuttle preparing for departure. It bore the insignia of House Valen, the same emblem he had seen on the limousine earlier that day. As he watched, a figure in an iridescent flight suit emerged from the shuttle's hatch, conducting a final external inspection. Though her attire was different, Elias immediately recognized the orange skin and molten eyes of Sunri Valen. She had changed from her earlier black bodysuit to more functional pilot garb, but her regal bearing remained unmistakable. Her hand rested on what was clearly a high-end blaster at her hip as she scrutinized her vessel. It was then that she sensed him. Her head snapped up, eyes widening as they locked onto Elias, but there was something else in her gaze, recognition, not of him, but of the keystone he held. Her posture stiffened, hand moving to her weapon. "You blocking my path, human," she said, her voice carrying across the dock. Elias stepped forward, holding the keystone where she could see it. "You drop this, princess. I'm not returning it to die at Lord Krell's refinery." Sunri's hand tightened on her blaster, but did not draw it. "How do you know of Krell?" she demanded. "A mutual acquaintance told me," Elias replied, thinking of Torren. "Right before he died, keeping the Vexari from taking this." Something flickered in Sunri's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "Torren," she whispered. "They found him, then—" "You knew him?" "He was my mentor, before the High Council branded him a heretic." Her gaze hardened. "Give me the keystone, human. It belongs to my family." "My name is Elias, not human," he corrected her. "And I think this belongs to both our peoples. If what I saw in the temple is true." Sunri hesitated, then slowly lowered her weapon. "The keystone chose you," she said reluctantly. "I felt it awaken. Its power calls to my bloodline, but it responded to your touch." She gestured to her shuttle. "Come. We have little time before Krell's forces track us here." Elias approached cautiously. "Why should I trust you? Hours ago, you called me beneath your caste." "And hours ago." "I believed that to be true," she admitted, her voice softening slightly. "But if the keystone has bonded with you, then perhaps there is more to our histories than I was taught." Her eyes met his directly. "I will not apologize for my beliefs, Elias, but I will listen to what the keystone has shown you." It wasn't quite acceptance, but it was a start. Elias nodded and followed her into the shuttle, the keystone secure in his pocket. The interior of the vessel was luxurious by human standards, with contoured seats that adjusted automatically to their occupants' physiology. Sunri took the pilot's position, her hands moving with practiced efficiency across the controls. "Where are we going?" Elias asked, as the shuttle hummed to life. "The Shattered Belt," Sunri replied, guiding the vessel out of the dock and into the void beyond. A region of asteroids that once formed a moon before the Great Schism. If Toran was right, we may find answers there, and perhaps the second keystone. The shuttle accelerated away from the hidden dock, revealing their location. A small, nondescript asteroid on the outskirts of the Geos system. The planet itself glowed in the distance, its cityscape visible even from space. Sunri piloted with the confidence of someone born to the stars, her movements fluid and precise. Elias watched her surreptitiously, noting how different she seemed outside the confines of Zeus's strict social protocols. "You're staring," she observed without looking at him. "I'm trying to reconcile the aristocrat from the marketplace with the pilot who handles this ship, like she was born to it," Elias admitted. A small smile curved Sunri's lips. "Perhaps both are true. My father insisted I learn self-sufficiency despite our status. A Valen should never rely entirely on servants," he said. Their conversation was interrupted by a warning beacon on the control panel. Sunri's expression darkened as she checked the readings. 6 Vexari interceptors approaching from the planet, she reported. They must have tracked the Keystone's energy signature when it activated in the temple. Elias leaned forward to view the tactical display. The Vexari ships were fast, already closing the distance. "Can we outrun them?" "No," Sunri said grimly. "But we can outmaneuver them." She pointed to a dense field of asteroids ahead, the Shattered Belt. "Prepare for evasive action." The shuttle lurched as Sunri pushed it to maximum acceleration, hurtling toward the asteroid field. The Vexari followed, their sleek black vessels gaining steadily. The first shots from the interceptors flashed past the shuttle's viewport, energy beams dissipating in the void. Sunri jinked the craft sharply, avoiding the next volley by mere meters. "They're not trying to destroy us," Elias observed. "They want the Keystone intact." "Small comfort if they disable our engines," Sunri replied, her focus unwavering as she guided the shuttle into the asteroid field. Massive rotating rocks loomed ahead, some the size of small moons, others no larger than the shuttle itself. Sunri wove through the tight corridors between them, her piloting skills truly impressive. The Vexari followed, their formations tightening as they navigated the treacherous path. A stray blast from one of the interceptors caught the shuttle's port side, sending it spinning briefly before Sunri regained control. Warning lights flashed across the console. "Port stabilizer damaged," she reported tersely. "We're losing maneuverability." Elias felt the keystone grow warm in his pocket. Acting on instinct, he removed it and placed it on the console between them. The device pulsed with blue light, and suddenly, hidden paths appeared briefly on the astrogation display, safe corridors through the asteroid field that were invisible to normal sensors. "What did you do?" Sunri asked, her eyes wide. "I think it's showing us the way," Elias replied, equally astonished. Without hesitation, Sunri adjusted their course to follow the Keystone's guidance. The shuttle slipped between 2 massive asteroids that appeared to be on a collision course, emerging safely just as they crashed together behind them. One of the pursuing Vexari ships wasn't so fortunate. It clipped the edge of a boulder and spun out of control, exploding in a brief flash of light. 2 more interceptors misjudged Elias and Sunri's evasive maneuvers, colliding with asteroids when the path they expected to remain open suddenly closed. Only 1 Vexari ship remained as Sunri guided the shuttle toward a hidden docking bay on a city-sized fragment at the heart of the Shattered Belt. The interceptor held back, seemingly unwilling to follow them into the treacherous docking approach. The shuttle touched down with a gentle shudder in a cavernous bay carved from the heart of the asteroid. Bioluminescent growths along the walls cast an ethereal blue glow across the ancient facility, which bore the same architectural style as the Temple of First Light. "We should be safe here, for a time," Sunri said, powering down the shuttle systems. "The shattered belt interferes with long-range scanners. It will take Krell's forces hours to pinpoint our location." As they exited the shuttle, they were greeted by an elderly Zanturi male whose faded amber skin was covered in intricate tattoos. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharp intelligence that reminded Elias of Toran. "Sunri Valen," the elder said, his voice surprisingly strong. "It has been many years since a member of your house graced these halls." "Mentor Kalen," Sunri replied with a formal bow. "I return in time of need. This is Elias Frost. He carries the first keystone." Kalen's gaze shifted to Elias, his expression unreadable. "A human. The keystone chose a human." He laughed suddenly, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. "How fitting. The cycle begins anew." "You knew Toran," Elias said, noting the same scholarly insignia on Kalen's robes. "He was my student." "Long ago," Kalen confirmed. "Before the High Council branded us heretics for speaking the truth of the Communion era." His expression grew somber. "Is he—" "Dead," Elias said quietly. "The Vexari found his safe house. He sacrificed himself so I could escape with the keystone." Kalen closed his eyes briefly, murmuring what sounded like a prayer in the musical Zanturi language. When he looked up again, his resolve was evident. "Then we must not waste his sacrifice," he said. "Come. There is much to explain, and little time." He led them deeper into the asteroid facility, through corridors lined with the same frescoes Elias had seen in the temple. Here, however, they were preserved in vivid color, depicting scenes of cooperation between humans and Zanturi during what Kalen called the Communion era. "For 10,000 years, our peoples built wonders among the stars," Kalen explained as they walked. "The keystones were forged as conduits of that partnership, physical manifestations of the psychic bond between humans and Zanturi." "What caused the schism?" Elias asked, studying a fresco that showed the construction of massive space stations. "Fear," Kalen replied simply. "Fear of losing power. The High Council, led by ancestors of House Valen, saw the growing influence of humans as a threat to their authority. They engineered a conflict that shattered the alliance and then systematically erased all evidence of cooperation from official records." Sunri's expression tightened at the mention of her family, but she did not dispute Kalen's account. They entered a small chamber dominated by a central table covered in ancient scrolls and holographic projections. Kalen carefully moved these aside to reveal a compartment beneath. From it, he withdrew an object identical to the one Elias carried, a second keystone. "Since Toran's death, I have safeguarded this," Kalen said, holding the device reverently. "It is one of 7, scattered across the galaxy to prevent their power from being misused." "And what exactly is this power?" Elias asked. "Truth," Kalen replied. "Pure, unfiltered truth, projected directly into the minds of all who witness it. The keystones, when united, reveal the suppressed history of our peoples and re-establish the psychic bonds that once linked us." He turned to Sunri, his expression grave. "The High Council feared this truth above all else, that humans and Zanturi are not separate, but complementary, that we achieved our greatest accomplishments together, not apart." Sunri looked troubled. "My father taught me that humans were a primitive species, barely worthy of the scraps of our technology we allowed them to use." "And that is the greatest lie of all," Kalen said sadly. "Look around you, child. These wonders were built by both species working as one." A loud boom echoed through the facility, causing dust to fall from the ceiling. "They've found us," Kalen said, his calm unbroken. "The Vexari are persistent, if nothing else." He placed the second keystone in Elias's hands. You must complete the bond ritual. Only echoes of the original human Zanturi pair can fully activate the keystones. Echoes? Elias asked, confused. Genetic and spiritual resonances, Kaelin explained hurriedly. The keystones respond to specific patterns in your DNA, patterns that echo those of the First Communion leaders. You, Elias Frost, carry the echo of the human diplomat who forged the original alliance, and Sunri carries the echo of the Zanturi princess, who welcomed him. Another explosion rocked the facility, this one closer. The inner sanctum lies through that door, Kaelin said, pointing to a hidden panel in the wall. I will delay them as long as possible. Come with us, Sunri urged, taking the elder's hand. Kaelin shook his head. My part in this tale is nearly complete. Yours is just beginning. He pressed a sequence on the wall panel, revealing a narrow passage. Go. Restore what was lost. Reluctantly, Elias and Sunri entered the passage, each carrying a keystone. The door sealed behind them, cutting off Kaelin's final words. They followed the corridor in tense silence, the sounds of conflict growing fainter behind them. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber, the inner sanctum. 7 equidistant pedestals stood in a ring around a central altar. Only 2 held keystones. The remaining 5 were empty, their surfaces dark and dormant. What now? Sunri asked, her voice hushed in the ancient space. Before Elias could respond, alarms echoed through the chamber. The outer door had been breached. Time was running out. Kaelin said we need to complete the bond ritual, Elias recalled. I think we need to place the keystones on these pedestals. Sunri nodded, moving to one of the empty pedestals. Elias approached another directly across from her. Together, they placed their keystones on the waiting platforms. The effect was immediate and stunning. The devices sank into place, channels of light spreading outward across the floor. The 4 empty pedestals began to glow faintly in response, as if awakening after millennia of slumber. Elias felt a strange sensation, a warmth that began in his chest and spread throughout his body. Across the chamber, Sunri gasped, experiencing the same phenomenon. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a connection formed between them that transcended words. Visions flooded their joined consciousness, clearer and more detailed than what Elias had experienced in the Temple of First Light. They saw the First Communion leader, a human diplomat, standing before throngs of both species. Beside him was a Zanturi princess, her orange skin gleaming in the light of twin suns. Their hands were clasped in a formal gesture that symbolized the union of their peoples. The vision shifted, showing the construction of vast fleets, the founding of colonies, the sharing of knowledge and culture, humans and Zanturi working as equals, their complementary strengths creating wonders neither could have achieved alone. And then came the betrayal, the fabricated conflict, the systematic erasure of their shared history, the creation of the caste system that relegated humans to the lowest rank. As Elias and Sunri stood transfixed by these revelations, something extraordinary happened. The 5 remaining keystones, scattered across the galaxy, began to glow with the same inner light. In orbit around Zeus, in hidden vaults on distant Zanturi colonies, in the personal collection of Lord Krell himself, the devices activated, responding to the call of their counterparts. One by one, they vanished from their locations, reappearing as points of brilliant light that streaked toward the inner sanctum. They arrived simultaneously, each finding its place on an empty pedestal. The circle was complete. A protective barrier of blue-white energy formed around Elias and Sunri, enclosing them in a sphere of light. From this cocoon, a psychic wave radiated outward, expanding beyond the sanctum, beyond the asteroid facility, reaching every Zanturi in Zeus and beyond. The wave carried the unfiltered truth of human Zanturi cooperation, shared starship construction, joint governance, cultural exchange, and the deliberate suppression of this legacy by the High Council for political gain. Every Zenturi who experienced the psychic broadcast was forced to confront this reality, including the High Council members and Vexari soldiers who had breached the facility's outer defenses. The barrier around Elias and Sunri pulsed once more, then slowly dissipated. They stood at the center of the sanctum, hands still outstretched toward their keystones, as the chamber door slid open. High Counselor Valen, Sunri's father, stood in the entrance, his ornate robes now seeming garish and out of place in the ancient chamber. Behind him were other council members and Vexari soldiers, all wearing expressions of stunned disbelief. Among them stood Lord Krell, his elongated skull and obsidian eyes marking him as the Vexari leader. He sputtered in outrage, drawing a weapon from beneath his cloak. Before he could fire, a beam of light from the central altar struck him squarely in the chest. Instead of harming him, the light began to strip away his genetic alterations. His gray-blue skin faded, revealing the orange tone of a pure-blooded Zenturi beneath. His elongated skull receded. His obsidian eyes lightened to reveal orange irises, similar to Sunri's. The transformation confirmed what the psychic truth had already revealed. The Vexari were never a separate subspecies, but Zenturi, who had been artificially conditioned to forget their own humanity. Krell collapsed to his knees, staring at his transformed hands in horror. "What have you done to me?" he gasped. "Restored you," Elias replied, stepping forward. "As the Keystones have restored the truth to all Zenturi." High Counselor Valen moved slowly into the chamber, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "Sunri," he said, his voice hoarse. "Is this real? These visions? These memories? They are real, Father." Sunri confirmed, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "The High Council, our ancestors, erased our shared history with humans. They created the caste system to maintain their power." Valen's shoulders slumped as the weight of this revelation settled upon him. I did not know," he whispered. "I believed as I was taught to believe." "As did I," Sunri said gently. "But now we know the truth, and we have a chance to rebuild what was lost." The other council members and former Vexari soldiers remained silent, their worldviews irrevocably altered by the psychic broadcast. The rigid hierarchy that had defined Zenturi society for millennia had been exposed as a deliberate fabrication. 6 months passed. In the Grand Plaza of Zeus, beneath a sky painted in shades of amber and gold, Elias and Sunri stood before a newly erected monument, 7 luminescent pillars, each housing a keystone. The plaza was filled with both humans and Zenturi, gathered to witness the formal announcement of a new era. Elias, no longer dressed in his worn jacket but in ceremonial attire that blended human and Zenturi design elements, addressed the crowd first. 6 months ago, a chance encounter in a marketplace set in motion events that would rewrite our understanding of history, he began. Today, we gather not as separate species divided by caste, but as partners in a shared future. Sunri stepped forward, her formal robes incorporating elements of both cultures. For 10,000 years, humans and Zenturi built wonders among the stars, she continued. The Great Schism tore us apart, and deliberate deception kept us separated. But the truth could not remain buried forever. Together, they announced the creation of the Communion Council, a governing body that would reform the caste system into a merit-based contribution model. Representatives of both species would serve together, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Former Vexari, now restored to their true Zenturi appearance, joined the crowd as humbled seekers of reconciliation. Many had chosen to retain their original names as a reminder of the deception they had once embodied. "We thought humans were beneath us," Sunri acknowledged. "Yet together we built wonders among the stars. Now we embark on this journey again, united. The ceremony concluded with the activation of the monument's keystones, sending a gentle wave of blue light across the plaza, a symbolic reminder of the psychic truth that had transformed their society. 5 years later, Elias stood on a balcony overlooking Zeus, now resplendent with human-Zanturi hybrid architecture. Spires woven with earthly gardens created a cityscape that honored both cultures, a physical manifestation of their renewed partnership. Sunri joined him, her hand resting on the swell of her pregnant belly. The child she carried would be the first natural human-Zanturi hybrid born in millennia, a symbol of hope for their integrated society. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," Elias said, his arm slipping around her waist. "All because you dropped an octagonal device in a marketplace." Sunri laughed, the sound musical in the evening air. "All because you were brave enough, or foolish enough to keep it," she corrected him. "And to challenge a princess who told you that you were beneath her caste. I still feel like I'm under arrest for impersonating someone important," Elias admitted with a grin. "Co-sovereign of the renewed communion was never in my career plans." "You wear the role well," Sunri assured him, her finger tracing gentle patterns over her baby bump. "Our son will be proud of his father's courage." Below them, the 7 keystones pulsed from the monument in the Grand Plaza, their light a constant reminder of the bond between their peoples, a bond that could never be severed again. "What shall we name him?" Elias asked, his hand joining hers over their unborn child. Sunri considered for a moment. "Toran," she suggested softly, "to honor those who preserved the truth when others would have destroyed it." Elias nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Toran it is." Together they stood, their intertwined silhouettes framed against the twin moons of Zeus, once symbols of separation, now beacons of a united future. The chance collision that had brought them together had indeed rewritten history, proving that the barriers between their peoples had always been artificial, and that the rite of the first night, the ancient bond ritual that united human and Zanturi, could restore what generations of deception had nearly destroyed.